Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to discuss a recent paper called Improved Language Identification Through Cross-Lingual Self-Supervised Learning, and this paper is coming from Facebook AI research team. As you can see, these are the authors. Some of them are familiar, Alex Pevsky and Michael Ollie. And the idea of this paper is to build something called language identification system. Many people might have may be aware of this problem, and the language identification problem exists both in text and audio domain. And in audio it's called speech language or spoken language identification, and we are going to discuss how the self-supervised learning can be used for the language identification task. Especially we'll look at the cross-lingual self-supervised models, and the tutorial in the tutorial we're going to first cover the introduction of the paper, like I said, and we'll see what is wave-to-vec pre-training. Many people maybe many people may be aware of this wave-to-vec or wave-to-vec 2.0 model, and we'll see how the pre-training is done. And especially the special case, we'll look at this cross-lingual pre-training, which is similar to wave-to-vec the pre-training, but uses multiple languages. We'll discuss that in details, and we'll see what is LID fine-tuning, which is the main motivation of the paper. So and we'll finally we'll see some experiments and results. So like I said, the paper talks about solving the language identification problem, the spoken language identification problem, where given an audio signal, you want to identify what language this audio belongs to, or what language the audio contains. It may be English, Hindi, Spanish, Portuguese, and so on. And how we can leverage the self-supervised pre-trained models for this language identification task. All right, and in case of NLP, many people use this BERT or GPT-2 model for language identification task, which is in the text domain. But in case of speech, similar to BERT or GPT-2, we have these wave-to-vec models which are trained on large amount of unlabeled audio data to solve contrast. I mean they're trained using noise contrastive learning or contrastive learning loss function, and once they are trained, the pre-trained model can be used for downstream tasks just like BERT or GPT-2. And the downstream task we are talking about in this paper is this language identification task. So like I said, you have the pre-trained model. Assume it is as assume it as some kind of a black box, and given an audio signal, you want to feed this audio signal through this self-supervised model. Let's call it as SS, and then using small amount of label data, we will fine-tune this SS with a language identification head, which is basically a simple classifier. And then once these two are ready, once they are trained, you can give any audio and predict what the language is, assuming we are talking about the closed set languages, where beforehand how many languages you can recognize, and then you have the language identification model with you, right? And we'll see how the fine-tuning of this wave-to-vec model is done for language identification task, similar to any other task like emotion or speaker ID and so on. And we'll see especially that using this cross-lingual pre-training, you can achieve a very good language identification performance with a very small amount of label data. And the paper shows that for 25 languages, with only 10 minutes of label data per language, you can achieve up to 93% accuracy, right? This is really good. You don't need so much. You don't need hundreds of hours of label data to get the 93% accuracy, right? So if you want to build an language identification system with an accuracy of 93%, you need hundreds of hours of data per language, and all those data, all those audios must be annotated, and that kind of takes time and takes a lot of money to annotate that, right? A human effort, right? So, but with this pre-training model, pre-trained cross-lingual pre-trained models, you can get very good accuracy with only very small amount of label data. Of course, to do the pre-training, you have to spend money to train the model, because these models are huge and trained on millions of hours of data, and they obviously need hundreds of GPUs, and you need many days, and for that you will have to pay the electricity bill for the GPUs, or if you're renting the GPU machines on the cloud, you have to pay money for that, but that is a different matter. But I don't think so that will cost that cost will be higher than hiring annotators. But anyway, so the idea here is very simple. Once you have large amount of unlabeled data, and if you can do the pre-training with this architecture, Wave2Vec architecture, and then if you can collect very small amount of labeled data per language, you can get a really good accuracy on this LID task, and we'll understand all these things in detail in the coming slides. So let's discuss what is Wave2Vec pre-training. So many people may be aware of Wave2Vec model. So the Wave2Vec model consists of three different blocks. So one is feature encoder, which is you can see here, and just a warning that this model is not exactly similar to the Wave2Vec model which people use for speech recognition. Those are I am going to tell you like what is the difference between this model and the original Wave2Vec model. So the concept is similar, but the architecture has little bit changes. We will see what those changes are. And like I said, it has three different blocks. One is feature encoder, and another one is called context encoder, and a quantization module, right? So these three are the main important blocks. But in case of the old Wave2Vec 2.0 model, which people usually use it for ASR task, it takes the raw audio as input, and the raw audio goes through the feature encoder layer, and feature encoder, you can call it as block. Feature encoder block has 7, in case of I'm talking about the large model, 7 1D CNNs, and they operate on this waveform directly, and out comes the vector z's or the embeddings, which will go to which can be transferred to, which can be passed into the context encoder and quantization block. This is what the architecture was in case of the original Wave2Vec model. But in case of this paper, they don't use the raw audio as it is. They use the log spectrum or log MEL spectrum, 80 dimension vector extracted for every 10 millisecond window, or 25 millisecond window with 10 millisecond stride, and these vectors are processed through something called time stack and linear layer. So that is the feature encoder. Here we'll understand what these things are in the coming slide. But so the difference, like I mentioned, like in case of feature encoder in this paper, it uses the input is the log MEL spectrogram, whereas in case of the old Wave2Vec 2.0 model used for speech recognition, they use raw audio as it is, right? And you can ask a question, what happens if you use the old Wave2Vec 2.0 model and fine tune that for language ID, which we don't know. Although there are few paper which explain how to use those Wave2Vec models for ASR, speaker identification, language identification, and emotion recognition. You can search them online, you will find them. But in this paper, they don't clearly give a reason why they went for log MEL spectrogram rather than a raw audio directly, right? But however, the architecture, like I said, remains as it is. In case of feature encoder, they don't use the 1D convolutions anymore. They use this time stacking. Time stacking basically is like this. Since the resolution of the feature extraction feature vectors are higher. So when I say resolution, since you are extracting for every 10 millisecond, for example for 1 second audio, you will get about 100 vectors, right? So in order to reduce these many features, in order to reduce the or in order to increase the efficiency of the computation, or in order to reduce the complexity, or the in order to save the GPU memory, you could stack a bunch of vectors next to each other into a single vector. So basically the time stacking layer does is it takes 4 or 5 vectors and stacks them on top of each other. So if your vector dimension is 80, the feature vector dimension, and you just multiply by 4, means you are stacking 4 vectors on top of each other, and you get a long vector which is 320, right? 320 dimension vector, right? So like that you can do it for all the other blocks, or all the other frames, right? And you are reducing the time you are reducing the time axis here, for example. So if you let's say if you add 100 vectors, and you are reducing it by 4, right? Time resolution reduces by 4, right? But however the y-axis increases again, but that should be okay, because the problem with the transformers is the computation, or the computation of the attention depends on depends linearly on the time frames, or the number of inputs, right? Input vectors. So anyway, so once this feature encoder output comes, or after the time stacking, you apply linear layer to reduce the dimension from 320 to a small number, and then you use the context layer to encode the contextual representation, which is basically how phonemes and how words are formulated, right? So for that you use again transformer blocks with the initial linear and convolution layer, and then what the transformer blocks. So the number of transformer block could be anything. In this case, assume there are 24 transformer blocks. After that you get a linear output, and then you get the contextual representation C, right? Now this C is basically a sequence of vectors, and those vectors are dense vectors. Now what the original Wave2Vec proposes is, you take Z's, which are the output from the feature encoder, right? Z vectors, and then pass them through something called quantization block, which basically reduces or converts these dense vectors into discrete vectors. So basically it's a simple quantization problem. So, and especially they use something called vector quantization here, and we'll see vector quantizations, especially the product quantization is what they use. We'll see that in detail in the coming slide. But if you want to understand these blocks in very much detail, you can refer to the Wave2Vec tutorial I have done I think about 6-7 months ago. In that I explain clearly, like, each and every block in the equations and so on. So once the quantization is done, you have these Q vectors, you have the C vectors, and you can use the contrastive learning loss, or CPC loss, in order to compute the loss and to train this whole architecture end to end, right? Now this is how the pre-training is done. Now we will see the cross-lingual pre-training. So as a matter of fact, there is no difference between the cross-lingual pre-training and the Wave2Vec pre-training in terms of architecture, but the change is only thing is, in case of the Wave2Vec, you can assume you are using a single language, maybe English. But in case of cross-lingual, so the idea is to mix all the languages together and train a single model using all the languages. And so the equations for pre-training, the architecture is similar. The loss basically consists of two parts. One is this LM, which is basically the contrastive loss. Maybe they call it as M because main loss or something, but it's a contrastive prediction coding loss, and it looks like this. So basically it's a you can think of it as some sort of a softmax, but the input inside of the numerator, you have similarity or cosine similarity between Ct, which is the contextual representation at time t, and Qt, which is the quantized vector or quantized embedding of zt, right? So you want to minimize the similarity, or you want to make the ct and qt close in some embedding space, right? Imagine this is your embedding space and this is ct and this is qt, right? And you want to make this distance between these two very close, right? While pushing away the negative samples which are not qt, right? And for that you will sample bunch of negative vectors from a pool of qt's, and those are just those could be vectors, the qt's other than the original qt. So it could be left vector or the right 10th vector and so on, right? So you want to in the case of in this case you want to minimize the distance between the ct and qt which are at time step t, whereas maximizing the distance between the ct and all other qt's, right? So qt bars they are called, or tilde, right? And this you can think of it as some kind of a softmax because this is how the contrastive prediction coding loss is designed. You take the minus log of it and you get this contrastive loss, right? And like I said, similarity of I comma j is just the cosine similarity, right, equation. That is one loss, which is the contrastive loss. That's the main loss. The second loss they use is this LD, which is called diversity loss. So the idea is to use the main reason why they use this loss is to make sure you will be able to sample, or you will be able to use all the code books entries in your quantization network, right, or quantization module. So the quantization basically, like I said, it contains it's a product quantization algorithm, and they use g number of code books, and each code book has a each code book has a entry, right? And let's say this is g1, g2, g3 and so on. These are groups, and you have codebook entry for every codebook, right? And let's call them as v. You have v entries for every codebook, and the idea is to minimize the entropy of the codebook entries, right, of the probability of softmax probability of the codebook entries. So basically the entropy is h here is basically as you know, entropy is nothing but the average information, and information is basically p log of 1 over p. This is like very well known equation if you have done information theory. So p log 1 minus 1 by p, and if you can write this as minus p log p, right, and this minus and minus cancels and you get this equation, and 1 over, so basically this is g is number of groups and v is number of codebook entries in each group, and then you sum over sum the information, or sum the entropy, and this you can also write it like this because you are using batches, right, in case of, and you have a number of frames and so on. So once you get this loss LD, you can simply add it to the main loss with some scaling factor lambda, and that lambda could be between 0 and 1, and that's a hyperparameter. So the final loss is sum of two losses, right? Now once you have this loss, you can simply train your wave-to-wake model, and in case of cross-lingual, you are going to sample multiple languages within the batch, and then you will train the model such a way that it sees many different languages during pre-training. So far so good. So once, let's say, you do the pre-training with cross-lingual pre-training with many different languages, and let's say your architecture reduces the loss, and you have, let's say, a stable network after loss convergence. Let's say you have a network which contains a feature encoder, context encoder. So what you can simply do is you just initialize your model with these weights. This is your base model, or the feature, you can call it, you can think of it as a feature extractor, feature extractor, which gives you very highly discriminative features for your downstream task, and those features you can simply pool across time. So this is also one of the important things. So basically the outputs you get from the context encoder is are like this. So you have time axis, you have feature axis, right? Now what we want to do is we want to classify the given audio or given input X, which is MFCC frame of a particular, or ML spectrogram of a particular audio, and you want to classify that into uh, one of the n classes, right? N could be n is number of languages in your closed set list, right? And what we want to do is since we want to classify, we have to convert this matrix into vector. Simply what you can do is you can simply pool across time, and the pooling can be done with various algorithms, or I can say various methods, which is average pooling, max pooling, or we can use statistics pooling, attention pooling, and so on. But in this paper they have only used average and max pooling, and concatenate the outputs from max and average pooling. So in case of average pooling, you just average out all the vectors, like all these items in the x-axis or time axis. In case of max pooling, you just pick the maximum activation of this vector, right? And then that you will get a vector, and then you pass it through a linear layer, and finally you put through softmax layer to get the distribution or probability distribution of probability distribution across across the languages, right? And like I said, you can use multiple averaging or multiple pooling techniques. In case of average pooling, what you do is you just average out the time axis, and in case of max pooling, you just find out the max of these items. And concatenated average max pooling is just concatenate the output from average pooling and max pooling and create a single vector. That's good. So I hope you guys understood the concept or the idea of this paper. So it's a simple architecture. Not simple, I would say it's a easy to understand and methodology. If you know about what is pre-training and how pre-training is done, and if you can implement it and run it, then fine-tuning it shouldn't be a big problem, because NLP guys do it all the time. So coming to the experimentation, so let's look at the data. As you can see, this is a crazy amount of data. As you can see here, it's like millions of hours of audio data, and even to store this, you will need like crazy amount of crazy amount of space, hard disk space. But these are Facebook people, so they can afford to do all these things. So they have huge amount of data for each language. Like English, you have more than 1 million R, then Spanish, and then I don't know what is AR is, probably it's Arabic, and so you have Hindi, Italian, French, Malayalam, Russian, Tamil, Kannada, so on. Right. So there's huge amount of data set. I mean, it's all audio, just audio clips. Like they have taken from social media, I guess, and these audio clips are anonymized, it seems. So I don't think so that the audio data is available for us, first thing, and second thing, I don't think so even the model is available. So so they have done all these experiments, but the models are not available as of now, but maybe in the future they will provide. But anyway, so this is the data set for both for training, for pre-training, and coming to the experimentations, the parameters like lambda they use 0.1, Adam optimizer same thing, learning rate with decay, weight decay, and penalty, and so on. So these are some of the things you can look at the paper and understand like what is the exact parameters they have, or hyperparameters they have chosen if you want to implement it. Coming to the results straight away, there is the results. In this result, you can see there are multiple models. So scratch model is basically if you take 1 hour of label data and train a model from scratch without any initialization, and you will get only 45% of accuracy, which is very bad, right? And if you use an English model, means you just pre-train on English and then you do LID on multiple languages, right? It still works. It gives you 93% accuracy, which is really good. And I think that's because the model, the pre-training, might exploit or might understand, make it sense of how phoneme sounds, how syllables and other kinds of features are present in the audio data. Second thing is, as you guys know, representation learning is one of the big field, and audio, what we use today for feature extractions layers like MFCC, ML spectrogram, those are very low level features, and building up these hierarchical features from those low level features with a very small amount of data, with very small amount of even label data, it's not enough to train or to get very good performance. But imagine a way you have imagine that you have a way to uh, pre-train this hierarchical network, or there is a way to get this hierarchical or a very high level feature representation using unlabeled data with this wave to wave kind of architectures, and using those high level representations, you can simply fine tune or simply alter those features to get very good performance. This is sort of having if you look at like if you look at a spectrogram, you can't really understand what is there in it, right? But if you can build some high level representation which has some really good discriminative feature capability, that you can simply that you can use, and then even with a simple linear classifier, those models will perform really well. So anyway, so like I said, so even with English model you will get really good performance, and XLSR 7 is basically a XLSR model or cross-lingual pre-training model with 7 languages, gets you 98% accuracy. But funny enough, you have this another model which is trained on 25 languages but gets you less accuracy, little bit less, right? These are some of the funny. Sometimes this happens. Even I have seen. When you're publishing paper, you will know. Like sometimes this happens. But anyway, they are close, right? So, but when you have 10-hour, when you have 10-hour of label data with Scratch model, you will get good performance, 77%, okayish. But the English wave to wave model gives very close or very good performance compared to both XLSR 7 and XLSR 25. In fact, it outperforms XLSR 25 by a little bit. Anyway, it's 0.1%. But as you can see, even English model is good enough for language identification task, right? And same thing happens with 100 hours of data. If you have 100 hours of data, Scratch gives you good performance, okay, like 90%. But the real deal is when you have the pre-trained models, you will get like straight away almost 10% improvement. These are really good numbers. I think one of the important number I wanted to see was, I wanted to show you guys was with 1 hours of label data. In fact, I'll show you in the next slide that even with 10 minutes of label data, you will get really good performance, and that you can see here. Like if you have very small amount of label data, 10-minute, Scratch model gives you worse performance. I would say this is like almost random. And in case of wave to wave English, you'll get bad results again. 7 gives you 72, but if you have if you have done pre-training on 25 languages, this is where you get the really good the actual performance gain on 25 language setup here. It means testing is done on 25 languages, but so as you can see, you are getting really good performance even with just 10 minutes of audio data if you have done pre-training on 25 languages. And similarly, there is not much gain from going from 10 100 hours to 1000 hours. I would say it's a very negligible, but yeah. Okay, there is another interesting experiment these guys have done. Basically, it's about uh, where do you tap the output from this architecture, right? Usually people say, let's take the last layer output and then you feed it to the LID classifier, right? I mean the pooling and softmax layer. But I mean, obviously that's working really well. As you can see, the numbers 98%, 99% accuracy. Those are really good number, almost close to. I mean, what else can you improve? Like if you have 99% accuracy, I mean, there is no uh, gap to fill, right? So it's just almost 100% accurate. But which layers are more responsible for better accuracy? So you can do a simple ablation study where you use the output from different layer, and you fine tune the model and see which layer actually gives you better performance, right? So in this case it shows that layer number 2 and 4, they don't give you good accuracy because those are very low level representation. It's as good as using the MFCC feature. But when you go to 8th and 10th layer, from 10th layer onwards you will get like almost flat accuracy for language identification task. But this is not the actual case for phoneme recognition and other tasks, right? If you are interested in doing research in this field, I mean, pre-training would be very difficult for you because you need enormous amount of data and compute, which may not be able to afford unless you are in big company like Google. But if you want to do, or if you want to still explore these kind of models, big models, you can do this kind of ablation study and understand what is going on in these self-supervised models, right? Like this, you have, let's say, gender identification task, and if you want to understand how the way performs on gender identification task or spoofing task or any other task for that matter, you can do these kind of ablation studies and understand what's going on in those models. So then you will actually be able to find out something, because people don't still know like what's going on in these models. They're just dumping huge amount of data, and then just there's a loss, and there's just the model crunches these numbers and then gives you something. But if you really want to understand what these models are actually doing, like the way, mathematically how these models works and so on, you can do all these ablation studies and understand okay, what these models are doing actually, if they are performing so well, right? So that is another experiment. And coming to the final experiment where they have results for different pooling architectures or pooling techniques. They're showing that average pooling kind of works really well. Combining those two is also really good. And using class token, it's kind of a different one, that gives you not so great. But I think average pooling, just average pooling or average and max pooling should give you better accuracy or best accuracy. So that's all for this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like the video, please give a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe for more of this kind of content. Thank you.